Willkommen and welcome to episode 2 about sustainability and climate change as a key trend. Part 1 was all about the basics, the assessment of climate change, whom it affects, its implications and risks. Let's recall an important aspect mentioned from Mr. Huber.
Let me highlight one thing here. In terms of economic sectors affected, we should not only think about the obvious industries coming to mind.
So, all sectors are concerned, and the EU plays a major role by aiming to set up and integrate sustainability regulations. This drive is based on a two-sided perspective.
Depending on which view you take, you either stress the risks a company faces due to sustainability risk factors, or you emphasize the risks a company itself poses to sustainability objectives.
With these refreshed memories, the base for more specific information is provided. You want to know which companies are subject to action? Listen to our expert now.
Welcome again to part 2. In this context, the Commission presented its proposal for a Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, CSRD, which aims to revise and strengthen the existing rule. In April 2021, who would this proposal affect and what would it change?
Well, this new proposal extends the EU's sustainability reporting requirements to all large companies and all listed companies. It also proposes to include an assurance requirement for non-financial information by companies. And EFRAG is currently working on harmonized standards to increase comparability of the disclosures. This proposal is currently being negotiated by the EU legislators and is planned to apply from reporting year 2023. In effect, this will likely require close to 50,000 companies to disclose information related to sustainability aspects.
Okay, this is all about larger companies. What about the smaller companies not legally obliged to provide such disclosures?
It is important to be aware that even smaller companies may be asked to produce a report. For example, if they are part of a supply chain of a larger company. As large companies sign up to net zero emissions targets, they may need to put pressure on their own suppliers to do the same. Furthermore, companies seeking a loan may be asked by the bank to provide relevant environmental information. Therefore, while small and medium-sized companies will generally not be subject to new legal reporting requirements, the Commission has also proposed developing simplified standards that non-listed SMEs could voluntarily use.
Great, that will be really helpful for SMEs. Let us again return to the financial impacts of climate-related issues on organizations. In our opinion, they are not always clear. For many companies, identifying the potential impacts and ensuring the material issues are reflected in financial figures may be challenging. Where do they get guidance for implementing these new requirements?
Determining the financial impact of climate-related risks and opportunities generally involves an organization 3 steps. First, it's exposures. Second, it's planned responses. And third, the effectiveness of these responses. Based on that, the company can then consider financial impacts on its revenues, expenditures, assets, liabilities, and capital. And there are various sources companies can look at for guidance. First, there is a supplement on reporting climate-related information to the EU Commission guidelines on non-financial reporting. That's from 2019 already. And companies should read this together with the Austrian Business Act. These guidelines are non-binding, and companies may also choose alternative approaches. Second, companies are also encouraged to read the recommendations of the International Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. This is from 2017. And there is also related guidance on how to implement these recommendations. You can find several stylized examples of material risks and opportunities and guidance on how to disclose them. And third, companies may also familiarize themselves with the so-called Global Reporting Initiative, GRI standards. This is an independent international organization, and its modular framework is frequently used by Austrian companies already, companies that are subject to non-financial reporting obligations. And the standards represent a kind of best practice for reporting publicly on a range of economic, environmental, and social impacts. So now what can companies do specifically? What is the road ahead? As most companies have important data gaps. At the outset, companies should be agile in their approaches. The Greenhouse Gas Protocol Accounting and Reporting Standard provides specific guidance how companies can measure their emissions from electricity and other energy purchases, and how to account for those emissions from throughout their value chains. Also, there are calculation tools to assist companies in calculating the greenhouse gas emissions and measure the benefits of climate change mitigation projects. And these tools also assist companies in preparing emission inventories.
Okay, based on these tools you mentioned, what key performance indicators, the so-called KPIs, should companies use?
First step, companies should always undertake a materiality assessment, and based on that, a company should then calculate its direct and or indirect greenhouse gas emissions. Also, if relevant, an absolute greenhouse gas emissions target in terms of metric tons CO2 equivalent could be reported, because target setting provides direction to the environmental strategy of the company. And in addition, KPIs could target the energy efficiency and targets for renewable energy consumption. Also the carbon footprint per employee, etc. In general, companies should use metrics and targets that are tailored to their particular climate-related risks and opportunities.
Are there any specific KPIs linked to the EU taxonomy of sustainable activities?
Yes. In general, companies subject to non-financial reporting obligations are required to report the extent to which their activities are already taxonomy aligned. In this regard, specific KPIs include the turnover in percent from products or services associated with taxonomy aligned activities, and investment or OPEX for assets or processes associated with taxonomy-aligned activities. And these requirements are being phased in from 2022, with KPIs to be disclosed from January 2023. Furthermore, KPIs can be linked to the targets of the Paris Climate Agreement and specific CO2 reduction pathways. In the financial sector, there are sector-specific regulations and KPIs. For example, the average carbon intensity of a portfolio. And under the so-called Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation, financial market participants are already required to disclose the extent to which their financial products are environmentally sustainable and address adverse sustainability impacts. And as already mentioned, companies not subject to the non-financial reporting directive, including small and medium-sized companies, may decide to voluntarily disclose their KPIs.
Okay, so To put in a nutshell, the transition to a carbon neutral economy affects companies, the investors and stakeholders, as well as policymakers alike. The most important message might be to motivate people to examine the issue and to become active themselves. Exactly.
That's the message we want to convey. Plenty of good reasons to start now, and the perfect is the biggest enemy of the best.
Start now. That's what it's about. And as we see, your cocktail is finished and so is our interview, which means that we can start with action right away. Thank you very much for enlightening us with your specific knowledge on sustainability issues for companies, Mr. Huber. It was great to have you as a guest in the Business Lounge Salzburg.
Thank you for hosting this podcast. It was my pleasure.
Another episode will be released in May. Stay tuned and keep listening on www.diebusinesslounge.at.